There is actually no way out. There will be suffering either way. And if you're not prepared, you're going to suffer even more. Hello YouTubers, Alaska Prepper here. Well, ladies and gentlemen, happy Friday first of all, and let me remind you that we will be having a live stream today at 2 p.m. Alaska time, 6 p.m. Eastern time. So hope to see you there. I thought that we'd do something a little different today. Instead of me covering the news, there's really not that much news to go over that I really want to cover because I just don't find too much interest in it. A lot of it is the same stuff, the economy, droughts, things like that we've talked about quite a bit. However, I thought that I would go over with you from a layman's perspective. We are going to go into a dark place. Why? Because your energy, your effort, your labor, your time is very valuable. To who? To you. But it's also valuable to someone else, to someone that wants to take it. So I want to explain to you why it is that we are headed toward a dark place when it comes to our economy and the monetary system by which we are governed. First thing I need to explain to you all is what inflation is. What is inflation? A lot of people think that inflation is just the price of things going up, when it is not. Inflation is when the money supply is inflated. So when the money supply increases, as you can see here in this M2 chart, which the M2 chart is the chart that shows how much the money supply in the economy has gone up over time. You can see that it's just pretty much skyrocketed over the last several years. Here, just in the last 2.5 years alone, the United States has printed, and when I say the United States, I mean the government / the Federal Reserve and banks, because they're all one and the same as far as I'm concerned. But the United States in the last couple of years, 2.5 years, has printed about 40% of all of the money that has ever existed in the history of our nation. So what does that mean to you and to me? It means that there's more money in the economy chasing either the same amount of goods or lesser amount of goods because of the supply crunch that we've had in the last couple of years or so. So whenever there is inflation in the money supply, as long as production or manufacturing keeps up with that inflation, meaning that the amount of goods, the ratio of amount of goods is equal to the ratio of amount of money that's being injected into the system, then the price of goods pretty much stay the same. But whenever there's more dollars chasing the same amount of goods or less, then the price of goods will go up because there's more dollars in the system. So the price of goods going up, instead of it being inflation, as people say it is, that's what they call it, it's really a symptom of inflation, a symptom of there being too much money in the system. Now, some people may say, well, the reason that the prices of this or that is going up is because, we've had a supply crunch, and they blame it on things like that. However, I would contest that by saying that if the elevated amount of money in the system wasn't available, then there would be what is called demand destruction. You see, if the monetary supply is not there and prices get high, then the demand for those items, they will lower because the money is just not in the system to support the higher prices. So eventually, if a store, or whatever you want to call it, a store, a dealership, a car dealership, whatever, if they bring their prices up too high, but the money is just not in the economy to allow people to go ahead and get those products, then people will stop buying those products, encouraging those manufacturers, those producers, those car dealerships, the supermarket stores and all these places to lower their prices because they're getting stuck with the inventory. And the inventory that businesses have on hand, they're actually paying interest on that. So they're motivated to move that inventory after a certain amount of time. I hope that you understand that part. So far we've talked about what inflation is. Inflation is the monetary supply going up. Right? And the price of things going up with more inflation, it just means that there's more money in the system than there are goods. So if there's more money chasing the same amount of goods, that means that the amount of goods, the price is going to go up. What's the best thing for high prices? The best cure is going to be high prices because it will create demand destruction. Right? So I hope that you understand that. Now, why is it that we are headed toward a darker place? Well, ladies and gentlemen, the Federal Reserve, one of their jobs is to control the price of money, which I think, in my opinion, is completely unconstitutional. However, let's just stick to the topic. One of the jobs of the Federal Reserve is to control the price of money. And what does that mean to you and me, the layman? All right? They control the interest rate on how much it costs to borrow money. The price of money means if you're going to go get a loan, what interest rate are you paying to borrow that money? So if you're going to borrow $100, what interest rate do you have to pay in order to borrow that $100 for whatever certain amount of time you're going to borrow it? That's called the price of money. That's the interest rate that is put on that loan. Well, right now, the interest rate for the Fed fund rate, I think it's around 2.75% or something like that. And that's the amount that they set that the banks go off of. And then the banks, they go ahead and add whatever they want to add to that, depending on what your credit score is, depending on what it is that you're going to buy, depending on whether it's revolving debt like a credit card, depending on whether you're going to buy a house. You know, there's a whole bunch of factors there. But they set the baseline of the interest rate, the Federal Reserve does, and then the banks add whatever they're going to add to it depending on a whole bunch of factors. So that's one of the things that the Fed does. And why do they do this? They do this in order to either make the economy go faster or make the economy go slower. You see, the lower that interest rates are, the more incentivized people are, and businesses, the more incentivized that they are to borrow money. Because the cost of borrowing money is a lot cheaper than if the interest rates were higher. For example, houses are not selling as much right now than they were a year ago. Why? Because a year ago, a 30-year mortgage was what, 2.5% roughly? Now it's 5.5%, 6%. That is a very large increase in the price of what it costs to borrow that money to buy a house. So the higher that the interest rate goes, the less economic activity that there will be, because we live in a debt-based society where most people borrow money in order to live, i.e. you borrow money to buy a car, you borrow money to buy a house, you have a credit card to buy your stuff. Most people do this, unfortunately, and where most businesses exist on credit. So it's very important where the interest rate are as far as how the economy is doing. So the higher that interest rates go, the more of a limit that it puts on what businesses and people can borrow at what price. So the higher it goes, the more that it hurts the economy. So that's why I've said in the past that here going forward, since the Federal Reserve is raising interest rates in order to fight the inflation that they themselves created. Remember, it's the Federal Reserve and the banks that create inflation by lending money out. Right? Inflation is created mainly when banks lend money out because they never had that money. That money, when someone buys a house and they sign that contract, and then the bank officer signs that contract, that money was created into existence out of nothing. So that money is created into existence and then it's put into the economy where it was never there before. And it is now chasing goods that were already there. So more money, less goods, higher prices, right? So now that they've seen what they've done and they've created so much inflation that the price of everything is going up really high, now they're trying to bring interest rates up to discourage people from borrowing, which will enable businesses to not be able to flourish like they were before because they were borrowing cheap money. What does that mean? A lot of layoffs. People are going to lose jobs. Not that many houses are going to be bought. Furniture manufacturers, people that make furniture, they're going to start laying people off. Some of them will probably go out of business. Why? Because when you buy a new house or you build a new house, what happens? You have to furnish it. When the person buys it, they need appliances, they need siding. All of these things are things that are in the economy. And people are going to lose a lot of jobs because now just with houses not being built at the same rate or being purchased at the same rate as they were before because interest rates are so high, a lot of people are going to lose a lot of jobs in a lot of different industries that support the house market. Same thing with vehicles, same thing with pretty much anything that people don't need to live. Why? Because when people are so tight on money, they're going to stop going to that Starbucks like they did. They're just going to do that as a treat. Instead of going there every day, maybe they'll go there once a week, and then they'll cut it down to once every 2 weeks or once a payday, and then once a month just as a treat. Whereas before they used to do it every day because now things are a lot tighter. So the more that they increase interest rates, the more that they reel in the economy and contract the economy. So they don't really have a choice but to do this, because the other choice would be not to do anything and then continue to create more inflation, to put more money out into the economy, where that would create hyperinflation. Think about it this way. In the last couple of years, they created about 40% of all of the money that's ever existed, right? Imagine if they continue to do that year over year. That means that in the next couple of years, they will have created over 100% on top of all of the money that we already have. They will have created an additional 100% of all of the money that ever existed. What do you think that's going to do to the price of things? It's going to create even more inflation in the price of goods, because there's even more money out there. So the Fed, no matter what they do, there's no good place. We're not going to find ourselves in a good place, no matter what the Fed does. If they continue to tighten, i.e., raise interest rates, the economy is going to suffer. The economy is going to contract and contract even more until they get inflation under control. If they go ahead and reverse course and stop contracting and stop bringing interest rates up and then instead bring it down, that means that there's more easy money in the economy. There's more easy money, therefore there's going to be more money pumped out into the economy. And then prices are going to go up and go up and go up at a faster rate than what we've ever thought before. What do I think is going to happen? I think that eventually the Federal Reserve will have no choice. I think that eventually they will stop tightening. They will stop increasing interest rates, and they will reverse course and start printing like there's no tomorrow. Because when they start printing, they are going to print so much money, or so much fiat currency really, that it is going to blow your minds, ladies and gentlemen, and the price of things are just going to go up to points that you've never even thought of. And why am I so confident in saying this? Is because if you study history, not very many governments have decided to tighten and implement austerity upon the people because it's just not politically viable. Think about this. If you're on Social Security and the government decides to continue to tighten and then implement austerity, and austerity means cutting out services that the government normally, sorry about that, my screen went black. And austerity means cutting out services that the government normally provided. Like, for example, let's say that you get Social Security and the government comes back and says, hey, listen, we just cannot afford to send out all of the Social Security that we normally send out. So we're going to have to cut your Social Security by 20%. You know, if you get a government retirement, same thing. That's austerity. It's not being able to provide those services and those things that they normally provided when they were printing money like there was no tomorrow, right? No government is going to do that. It's not politically viable. At least I don't think our government is going to do that. Think about this. Right now, inflation, as stated by the government numbers, right now it's about 9% year over year, right? Roughly 9%, okay? The Fed fund rate is only at 2.75, let's say 3%. And look at how much the economy has contracted so far, just up to 3%. Imagine if the Fed goes all the way up to 9.5%, 10%, which is what it would take for inflation to be reeled in. Imagine how much devastation there would be in the economy if the Fed does this. So ladies and gentlemen, prepare, because it doesn't matter what the Fed does. They're in a catch-22. They are up against a corner that they put themselves in. And unfortunately, it is the people, we the people, that will suffer. These guys up there that make the decisions that they make, they're not going to suffer. It is us that we have to live with the consequences of the decisions that they make. And that is why you must prepare. Because there is no easy way out. There is actually no way out. There will be suffering either way. And if you're not prepared, you're going to suffer even more. Why? Because it's going to happen, whether you like it or not. And it's not something that I wish upon anyone, but it's just reality. It's just the facts of the life that we live here in this country and in most countries in the world. Same thing is happening. Whenever a country, and I've stated this before, whenever a country has a central bank, there's only one way that inflation can go, and it's up. It is up, 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 no matter what. Sure, some years it may be 2%. Sure, some years it may be 1%. But when you take the aggregate of over the years, it's always up. And inflation is one thing and one thing alone. It is a way that the government can steal your wealth by stealing the purchasing power of your dollars. Again, I'm not going to go ahead and beat this horse to death, so thank you very much for joining in. I hope that you have a great day. Remember to be good to each other. When good people do good things happen. Remember to reach one, teach one, and repeat. If we all did this, the world would be a better place, and you know that it will be a better place. Many blessings to all of you and your families. I'm Alaska Prepper. I am out.